Morning everyone. In this series of videos we're going to look at London by William Blake. This video will be focusing on the structure and the form of the poem. There's a link in the description to the other videos as well as a link to the slides if you want them. So as mentioned in the context video, this poem comes from Blake's collection of poems called Songs of Innocence and Experience. It's supposed to have a song-like feel to it, which explains that AB rhyming structure. And all that this means is that the first and third lines of each stanza rhyme, and all of the second and fourth lines in each stanza rhyme. Now there are 4 stanzas, and in each stanza there are 4 lines. A 4-line stanza is known as a quatrain, so there's 4 quatrains. So it's got this very regular structure throughout, perhaps to symbolise that the poor conditions people were living in were very much the norm. It was regular, just like the structure. Now looking at the narrative of the poem, or the journey of the poem, stanza 1 is about the people that the speaker meets and how they're being affected by the conditions of society. Stanza 2 is about how people are being affected too. Stanza 3 starts considering why people are living in these conditions, so thinking about the church and the palace and those who held control of society in the 18th century. But in stanza 4 he moves back into discussion about the people and how they are affected again. So because this poem starts and ends in the same way, we could say it's got a cyclical structure to it. But remember, it's not enough to just label the technique. We need to consider why this technique has been used, and we might all have completely different ideas on why a certain technique was used. This is what gains your marks, your interpretations of what you think the reason is, or what it symbolises. So you may disagree with me on some of my interpretations, and that's okay. The more interpretations that you have, the better. That said, I'm going to take the cyclical structure, the repetition of certain words such as chartered, cry, infant, mark, here, every, the repetitive 4-line structure, and the repetitive rhyme scheme. I'm going to lump all of these techniques together and suggest that they could have been used to show that the harsh, oppressive and constricting conditions of London society are constant and never changing. Blake seems to be suggesting that this is normal and will always be the norm unless we the people do something to change it and break the cycle. He suggests that the same sorts of people will always be in power, i.e. the church and the palace, and the working class will always be trodden on. These will always be normal, regular, never changing parts of everyday life unless we change it. Could this be a nod to the French Revolution that Blake supported, even admired, as we discussed in the context video? And before we go any further, I just want to explain a little bit about structural features of poems. The English language is what is known as a stressed-timed language. This just means that certain syllables are longer and some are shorter, some syllables are stressed and some are not. This isn't true for all languages. In Japanese, for instance, all syllables are of equal length and stress. Now an iamb is a pair of syllables where the second syllable is stressed, so it sounds like da-dum. Words such as convert, arrange, destroy, or belong are all examples of iambs. The second syllable in the pair is stressed. Now a trochee is the opposite. The first syllable is stressed, so it sounds like dadum. Words such as English, Michael, cactus, or laptop are examples of trochees. They all have the emphasis on the first syllable in the pair, and if you change where the stress is in the word, it just sounds completely bizarre. Try it sometime. Now let's take this even further. When we talk about metre in poetry, we're referring to the rhythmic structure of a line or a stanza of the poem. Let's take the line, I wander through each charted street. We can split this up into pairs of syllables, and we find that every second syllable in this line is stressed. So these are all iambs. Then we note that there are 8 syllables in the line, or 4 pairs of syllables. The Greek word for 4 is tetra, and we're discussing the meter of the line, so we call this tetrameter, which just means 4 sets of 2 syllables. And because every second syllable is stressed, it's called Iambic Tetrameter. Now that we get Iambic Tetrameter, we can dive a little deeper. The poem begins with 8 syllables per line. Let's take the first stanza. 8 syllables on the first line, or 4 pairs of syllables. Every second syllable is stressed. Iambic tetrameter. Same with line 2. Same with line 3. Noticing a pattern? This is getting familiar. It's starting to feel normal. But don't get too used to it, because Blake ditches it for line 4. So then we notice that unlike the rhyme scheme, which is quite regular, and unlike the 4-quatrain structure, which is quite regular, there's a shift in the meter of the poem. The 4th line only has 7 syllables. And I think it's quite significant that this variation comes in during the line that Blake is writing about weakness. This line seems to be weaker than the others. It's no longer iambic, and it only has 7 syllables. It feels almost incomplete, perhaps like the lives of the citizens of London. Lines 5 to 8 revert back to iambic tetrameter. But then in the 3rd stanza, this weakness seeps back in again with 7-syllable lines. Sort of like all of the people that he meets as he wanders through London, these lines are weaker than the rest. They're in poor condition. Now this is where you can get creative and come up with different reasons that Blake chose to do this. Let's assume, for argument's sake, that he made a choice to have 9 lines with 8 syllables and 7 lines with 7 syllables. Think about why he might have done this, and what this divide could suggest to us. Try and get creative with your ideas. Perhaps we could infer that the divide in society is shown through Blake's rhythmic choices. Could we say that the dominant people in society, the rulers in the palace and the church, are shown by the iambic tetrameter? This stronger form dominates the poem with over half of the lines, just like they dominate the society. Similarly, could we say that the weaker part of society, those being oppressed, are represented by the weaker lines? The lines seem incomplete, just like their lives are incomplete. They are the subservient in society, the chimney sweeps, the infants, the harlots. They are weak in terms of their power and weak in terms of their physical conditions due to harsh living conditions, and this could be represented by the weaker lines. Like I said, the key to higher marks is getting creative with your interpretations of Blake's choices. Try to be original when thinking of reasons that Blake made these choices. And that's all for today. I hope you found it useful, and if you did, don't forget to hit the like and subscribe buttons. It really helps out with YouTube's algorithms. Thanks for watching, and happy revising.